Yeah, so the regulations say designed to contribute to generalizable knowledge. They specifically did not say intended to contribute to generalizable knowledge, but for some reason that makes more sense to me. So I guess the way I look at it is, if, you know, like, why am I doing this? What's my intention? If it's just to, you know, improve yourself as a teacher, or, you know, to answer some question within your class, you know, like you're saying, I do seem to describe it as one zone. But that isn't designed or intended to contribute to generalizable knowledge. But, you know, that there's definitely great benefit to it. I don't know, do you think that answered it, or?
I think it might be a better question maybe for the students here, because I've heard that project come up. And so it might be, or, you know, and maybe this, for the second half, is just to really think about evaluation of what constitutes research and what doesn't.
Sure.
Because a gray area I'm sensing is that fine line of, are you intending to move this forward for generalizable knowledge, or are you really just keeping it for your own as action research, which is really the focus here.
Absolutely.
Well, I think another thing that commonly comes up related to that is there's a misconception. I remember us talking about this once before. The misconception that's out there that says, if I ever intend to publish anything about my study, do I have to have human subjects approval? And you've told me before, the answer is no, not necessarily. So, for example, if I'm going to do a study on iPads, and I want to see what impact the use of iPads has on this unit that I'm going to teach my students, and I'm going to maybe I'm going to observe and interview them or survey them or something and say, hey, here's what happened in my class when I used iPads teaching this unit. I can write an article about that. I can put something in the Ohio Journal of School Math talking about the use of iPads in my classroom and what I learned. I'm not claiming this is true for everybody. I'm not trying to generalize. I'm writing more of a kind of a case study of, hey, here's what I did in my class and here's how it played out. So you can publish that kind of thing as long as you're not going to take that extra step and start to say everybody ought to be doing this, because students will learn better if they do ABC. Once you leap into that generalizing, then you're across the line.
Exactly, yeah, that's definitely true. There's a real common misconception that just telling someone about what you did makes it generalizable, and that's not true. You can definitely tell people about what you did in your classroom and if it worked or not, as long as you don't take that next step saying that your results with your 30 students are now generalizable to, you know, all other English classes. More questions in the back. Yeah?
Anything else? Other questions? Okay, well, we can continue to talk in our next little bit together as we talk about a few of your projects. A couple of other questions might come up, but do you see how important of a piece this can be, depending on what, you know, how far you go with a study? And this may very well be something that the vast majority of us, maybe all of us in the room, will not have to worry about doing for this particular project. But when you come back and get a master's degree, and you're working on a master's thesis, and you may be in a school running some kind of an experimental study or something, the probability gets extremely high that you will need to go through this process, because you're going to end up doing some kind of generalizing on a kind of a bigger scale.
I guess, like, I don't know about the process, but like once you get all your forms like done, how long does like the approval process typically take?
That's a good question. So, when an application comes into the office, assuming that it doesn't have to go to the full board, the turnaround time to have it reviewed varies on how busy we are in the office. I think lately our turnaround time has been about 2 weeks, but typically the outcome of the first review is modifications required, and that means that you have to make changes to your documents or clarify things. And depending upon the quality of a submission, it could be approved right away, it could be approved on the first set of revisions, but sometimes we'll have students that aren't working with their advisors and they'll go through like 4 or 5 rounds of revisions. So it really depends.
If it's a pretty clean proposal, that on the first time through, you've worked with your advisor well enough, you turned it in, it doesn't need a full board review, so you're not drawing blood or anything, theoretically, unless you're fighting with your students. But then that kind of a review will probably go through within a month, 6 weeks.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I think the key is just, if you do go through the process and the board asks you to make changes, if you don't understand what they're asking you to change or what information to provide, just really call my office and ask, because that will really speed up your approval time. Kristen and I get really invested in the people we work with, and we're rooting for them. Gotta get these people approval.
And they are very helpful in that office, because I've used that phone call to say, what should I do about it, and they always know the answer. Thank you for coming. We appreciate
All
having you.
right.
With that, what I'd like to do is get a little bit of an update of where everybody is in the room right now with your writing, with your ideas of for your projects. We're in a position right now where I know that some people are still just kind of trying to figure out exactly what you want to write about for this initial paper. Others have got a topic and you're ready to roll and you've been working on it. I want to get a sense of where we are in the room. So the easiest way to do this is to get everybody in a circle of some kind that we can see one another. Can you kind of move chairs around so that you can all see each other? All right, so what I'd like to do is, maybe we'll start with Lance. If you want to tell us what who your advisor is, and just at this point, what area are you most interested in? Maybe you got a couple of interests you're pursuing, wherever you are right now with your paper and your research interests, so we kind of get a sense of where we are in the room.
I'm working with Dr. Bostic, and I have my question figured out where we're looking to see. Like, you want to talk like what my question is for my research? Okay. So we're looking about how students view using their textbook as a resource to help them learn and understand mathematics. And I'm going to do a survey to figure out, how they feel about that at the beginning of the semester. And then I'm going to do my teaching in a way that teaches them how to read the textbook and how to use it as a resource. Give them some guided notes to do throughout the course of the semester, and that will hopefully encourage them to use the textbook as a resource. Take a survey at the end of the semester, and I also going to be doing interviews to supplement those surveys to really feel, did my notes help them use their textbook as a resource. So right now, I've done my annotated bibliography, I got my resources, and over winter break, I'll be doing my outline for my lit review and my outline for my methods.
You still have
All right.
Yeah.
So there.
I'm pretty sure. What?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Come on now. Sarah beat that.
I don't really know how to follow that. I'm working with Dr. Matuga, and I have my research question. I'm looking into how students, how they perform on tests and whether it correlates to how they attribute their success or failures. So we have put together sort of a method that I'm going to try and do, which is give a test and then survey them on how they attributed how they did on the test, and then go through the test with them, explaining why each question is correct and how it should have been, and then have them go through and fix it and write why they missed each one, or why they got this one right. And then later on in the semester, so after they have realized oh well, she made this test fair, this is why I did wrong, if later it changes how they attribute how they did on the test. So that's kind of what we have laid out. And so now I'm just working on getting my sources and laying everything out, and I should have a rough draft of everything by January.
That sounds interesting. When you think about what a student does really well on a test, some students will say, well, I did great because I studied so hard. Some will say, well, the test was just easy. Some will say I was lucky, Or conversely, if they do poorly on a test, well, it's all the teacher's fault, she didn't teach it well. You know, or, I mean, there's all kinds of things like this. You're gonna kind of look at how they're thinking about what's on the test and how it influenced them changes.
Yeah, I really want to know, like, if, like, students are doing well, if they think it's because of their own success, or if they think, oh, it's just easy. And I also want to, like, look at, like, well, if they think it was easy, it's because they think that they're good at math, or do they have good views towards math? Or is it, oh, I hate math, so it had to have been an easy test if I did well on it.
I'm working with Sansony Longbreak, and her and I haven't like specifically narrowed down a topic yet, but I know that I want to do something with like psychology or educational psychology and how that affects student learning, like things that include differentiated instruction versus any other kind of learning or teaching strategies. And right now I'm currently looking into other research projects and like drawing ideas and looking at their outcomes and seeing how it'll influence mine.
Yeah, a trick to that is that the whole idea of educational psychology is so big, so.
I know, there's so many things that I could
Yeah,
do it to.
I mean, differentiated instruction is one piece of that, that's one thing you could look at, in addition to anything from motivation to you name it, so to find that one piece. You're in the right place if you do a lit review of what's been done with how kind of the influences of psychology on the lessons, and then try to narrow down what pieces of psychology you want to look at. So.
Okay, I'm with Matney, and I just sort of changed mine like yesterday, because I was looking into like sports questions to see like if you have say like 10 basketball players in the room, if you do a lesson about basketball, if they do better than people who like aren't interested in basketball. But then I kind of realized I won't know what grade or what like material they'll be learning, so it might be hard to find like questions for that. So I sort of broadened it, I guess, to just do like as many real world questions as I can and see if like they prefer a certain real world question over like sports real world questions, and just see like basically just get their opinions as to like what they think about their questions, I guess. I don't know. I'm sort of still working on figuring it out.
Okay, so I think that the issue you're bringing up here is a good one. Something else I want to remind everybody about, and that is that remember that this is kind of a two-step process. The first step is writing this particular paper, which is sort of get some research idea that you have on paper to get you doing a literature review and writing about a problem in education. Okay? And then the other piece of it is once you have a methods placement and you're actually in the field in the fall, then you will develop that into more of kind of a formal proposal of here's the literature review and here's how I'm going to do my research, etc. And your minds may change. So it may very well be that you write this paper, it's due in March, you get it done, you turn it in, and then when you get the field placement in the fall, you decide, I really want to take a different spin on this than I originally figured. And that's okay, you can do that. Or it may be, so for example, Meg, you might start yours out and say, here's my general idea, and you get into the field and you discover, that whole issue of doing something on basketball actually does fit what I'm going to be teaching, and I'm going to go that route, and that's okay. So don't feel like what you're writing right now is going to box you in, that this is the absolute final thing you have to do next fall, or really the following spring. You got plenty of time here. That's why we want you to get out in the field, get familiar with your field site, and say, is this topic I was interested in this year still relevant next year, and is it really researchable with my class? And then you can make some final decisions and rewrite as you need to next fall. Good. Thanks, Richard.
I'm working with Dr. Neal, and I originally wanted to do something about perseverance, like how can I teach my students to, when they're doing homework and stuff, instead of giving up when they don't know how to do a problem, to persevere, like go through their notes and try to figure out how to do it instead of just saying, well, I don't know how to do this one. So when I've been researching it, I'm finding a lot of stuff about motivation. I just keep finding more and more books, so I'm doing a lot of reading because there's a lot of sources out there that talk about ways you can show your students forms of motivation and like give them motivation. So right now I'm just at the point where I need to stop reading because it's like so interesting to me and actually find like common themes and hopefully bring that into perseverance. But I'm starting to lean towards motivation because I think it'll be easier to test and there's more sources for it. There's not as much stuff that actually says the word perseverance in it. So it'll be interesting for me to figure out how I can kind of mix the two. But that's what I'm at right now.
perseverance is an interest.